As Catholics, how do we show that baptism actually saves? How do we share this with our fellow non-Catholic Christians? First off, why should we do this? First is because Jesus said so. That's the short answer. And if we expand a little bit on that, it's because we want the Church of Jesus Christ to be united. And when other Christians end up saying and spreading this lie, really, that baptism doesn't save, that it's just a symbol, it further creates division among the church, and we want to bring unity because Jesus Christ gave us one church, and we want that church to be united. So whenever we have a fellow Christian, a brother or sister who doesn't believe baptism saves, we should lovingly bring them back to the truth. So that's why this matters. The next question we should ask is when to bring this up, and obviously who to bring this up to, right? I think that's right. So when to bring this up, keep in mind, not all Protestants believe baptism is just a symbol. So usually when someone says, I'm just a Christian, they often mean that they are a non-denominational Protestant, right? And that probably means that they don't believe baptism saves and they believe it's just a symbol. Baptists, of course, if they say, oh yeah, I'm Baptist, like that's a clear example of when you should bring this up, because the biggest problem is that a lot of non-Catholic Christians just believe that the Catholic Church, that we make things up. But no, we believe baptism saves because the Bible says so. So that brings us to the next question, which is like, okay, how do we defend the fact that baptism saves? Now, there are a lot of verses in the Bible that can really help us defend our position. So I think it's important for us to not bombard the non-Catholic Christian with a lot of verses because it gets overwhelming and they'll just shut down. Instead, just bring them one verse. So if you're going to start with one verse, I think we should start with a strong one. And the one that I recommend starting with is Mark 16:16. There's a few others, but I think this one, especially when you are in conversation with a fellow Christian, I think this is a really solid one. And I really recommend that you say, hey, can we take a look at this? Can we read this together? And when they try to run away to go like, oh, but what about this other verse? You can say like, okay, yeah, we can take a look at that in a second, but can we just fully take a look at this and see what we can deduce from it? So this is really powerful. Let me show you how I would present it. So first, of course, you would read them the verse, right? So it would start like this. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned, right? From there, you can tell them, it's like, okay, let's break things down in parts, because if you notice, there's two parts to this verse. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, and then part 2, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. And here you can tell them, I suspect that we already fully agree on part 2, but I also suspect that we might not agree what part 1 means, right? So you start breaking it down. And we can read the following. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. So from here, we can clearly deduce that belief is necessary for salvation. They'll fully agree and they'll be like, yep, we're on board. And then he would say, from here, we can also deduce that baptism is necessary for salvation. And they'll be like, whoa, it's just a symbol, right? But this is what we need to break down. This is the whole point of this verse. Because we believe that therefore the statement baptism saves is true, because whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Now, we're going to take a look at some of the objections, but that's the breakdown of part 1. And they'll be like, okay, wait, can we read the whole thing in full again? You'll be like, yeah, no problem. Here's the verse in full, part 1, part 2. So we just broke down part 1, let's break down part 2, right? But whoever does not believe will be condemned, right? And I'll be like, you see? Yeah, right there. And you'll be like, what? And they'll say, yeah. So in this part 2, it only talks about the importance of belief, right? But we'd be like, okay, wait a second. What this shows is that even if you have baptism, but you remove belief, you will be condemned. Here we can ask them, do you think that part 2 overrides part 1 in any way? And we'll be like, okay, here's a couple of rules that we need to understand when taking a look at verses in the Bible. One is that we shouldn't remove things and we shouldn't add things either, right? So don't remove. We can remove words from this verse. From part 1, we cannot remove by saying, like pretending this isn't here and saying whoever believes will be saved. It says whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, right? So we can't get around the fact that it says in here that baptism is also a requirement for salvation. This is what you can tell them, right? Because this verse simply says that both belief and baptism are essential for salvation. That's what the verse is saying. So if they start interpreting part 2 in a way that brings them to make this mistake of scratching this off, reading it as if that is not there, that would be trying to scratch something you don't like from the Bible because it doesn't align with your beliefs. Therefore, we can't do that, right? The other thing we cannot do, and this is what you would tell them, right? Like, we cannot add extra text in hopes to change the meaning. So they might accidentally, just because they believe that baptism is just a symbol, they might accidentally take a look at this and say, okay, I think, yeah, it says baptized, but it must mean something more specific. And they might accidentally add something else to this, such as whoever believes and then as a symbolic choice is baptized will be saved. Like, no, that's not what the Bible is saying. The other thing that they might say is like, whoever believes and therefore eventually is baptized will be saved, that's another mistake because that is adding to the Bible as well. We just need to lovingly correct them and say, like, I think you might be adding something in here. So you can tell them whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. These two things are requirements. They're both essential for salvation, right? And by this point, they might start feeling a bit uncomfortable, being like, oh man, this is difficult. So they might want to go to another verse in the Bible. You can tell them, I'm happy to take a look at other verses in the Bible, but no matter how many verses we take a look at, we're going to have to come back to this verse later, and we're going to see whether we're reading it for what it says or whether we are removing or adding something which is not what we want to do. As you keep digging deeper, they'll say something like, okay, but what about this case? What about that case in the Bible, right? So here you can be prepared because you can anticipate exactly what they're going to say. It's like, what about the thief on the cross? Was he baptized? And the answer is fairly straightforward. God can work in extraordinary ways, but still the ordinary way of being saved is to believe and be baptized. The fact that there is an exception doesn't mean that the rule doesn't exist, right? So yes, the thief on the cross was saved in an extraordinary way. He repented at the very end of his life, and through belief, he was saved. But the rest of us who are in our deathbed, the ordinary way is just like it says in the verse. We need to believe, we need to be baptized, and if you lose your belief, you will not be saved. This is in so much alignment with Catholic belief that it's not even funny. This shows that even if you have baptism, which saves you, but then later you stop believing, you will be condemned, right? So you need to have both. You need to have baptism and belief. Can God do things outside of the ordinary? Absolutely, right? And that's the whole point of this. They might bring other questions such as, okay, what about baptized babies that die before they get to believe? Again, the same thing. That is an extraordinary way. God can still save them, but that doesn't disprove that the ordinary way for the rest of us is to receive our salvation in baptism, and then through belief, we can persevere till the end. The other one is, okay, what about people who believe but died before they were baptized, right? Again, same answer, really. The thing is also that if you did have the intention of getting baptized, God sees that. Like, God will judge your intentions. Again, the fact that there is some exceptions doesn't show that the rule in this verse doesn't apply. You need to believe, and you also need to be baptized, and you need to persevere in that belief. This is what part 2 really is showing us. Now, I really find like this website structure that I have in here very handy. I actually have this on my phone ready for the next time that I talk to someone who says like, hey, baptism is just a symbol. I'll be like, let me take out my phone and I'll show them this. I'm actually right now offering this for free, so check it out in the description. More information on how you can get this on your phone. I mean, I doubt that you will walk around with your laptop, so that's why this works on the phone pretty well as well, so that you can just show them the verse and you can say, okay, there's 2 parts, and let's take a look at the meaning of part 1, part 2, and then the exceptions, of course, like, because they'll say this and they'll be like, what, you already have that on your phone? You knew I was gonna say that? I think it's pretty nice to just have a dynamic way to be like, hey, here it is, don't add, don't remove, you know? So that's the idea. I hope you find that helpful, and again, you can just check out in the description how you can just access this for free for you to use, right? With that said, God bless you, hope you have a great day, and go spread the Catholic truth with those around you. God bless you.